Yeah, so tonight we are going to continue our discussion of blessings and brachas in particular. And I'm going to actually show you some blessings from a traditional, which is to say Orthodox prayer book. And then that'll probably take us to the point where we're, I don't know, 7:30, 7:40 or so. And Alan is going to show us, talk about his most recent visit to Israel and some of his photos about that. So I'll make just one kind of opening comment, and we'll see it, I think, particularly as we go through the list of kind of standard blessings, because we would, as we were getting ready to start this talk, several folks here on the screen have experienced COVID, and one is actually just experiencing it at the moment. And last night started a regime of Paxlovid, and he has expressed amazement at how well it's working. And you know, there used to be that old commercial, I think it was for Rolaids. Actually, I'm not sure it was for Rolaids. How do you spell relief? What was it? Anybody remember what that was for? Anyway, and so the idea, my theory and thesis on the power of Jewish blessings is to notice when things are going well, even miracles in your life. And you know, for anyone who's sick and really feeling lousy for whatever reason, COVID's a great example, and then you feel okay, you know how grateful you feel. And you know, you're blessing COVID, you're blessing, you know, anything that moves. So the idea in Jewish blessings is to stop and notice when something is working as it should. And I always talk about, I don't think I have this in the traditional prayer book, but there's a blessing that we say after going to the bathroom, and it's actually quite a long blessing. And it's very graphic. It talks about parts of the body that should be open from time to time and parts of the body that need to remain closed. And it says that if something is wrongly stuck open or wrongly stuck closed, it would be impossible to stand before you. So the point is, every time you go to the bathroom, you're acknowledging that the plumbing works. What in Yiddish is called yakishkes, and it's a wonderful thing. And if you don't think it's wonderful, think back to a time when it didn't work, and how grateful you were when it finally worked. So there's a list of lots and lots of blessings, which is designed to recapture that.
We have to say that every Saturday at the shul there is about 15 or 20 blessings.
So it's been
the miracles.
Yeah, it's been incorporated, particularly in the Reform prayer book. I actually don't know if it's in a traditional prayer book, as a part of morning blessings. But it is traditional actually to say after you've used the bathroom. And if you're traveling in Israel, Alan, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but outside of bathrooms, they may have that blessing posted outside. You don't say it inside because the bathroom is considered to be an unclean place, and you're not supposed to study Torah. You're not supposed to say blessings in the bathroom. Stephen.
What I don't understand about that blessing is, and I think this might be actually just a part with the English translation, not with the original Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
It says if any of the openings are blocked for even a moment, it would be impossible to survive even for a short time.
Right.
Which is obviously not true, because people do survive for varying amounts of time.
Short time is not in the Hebrew. It would be impossible to endure and to stand before you. So the short time, I would say, is part of an English editorial edition.
Translation's so inaccurate, both in the sense of
they're trying to transmit,
and sense of not factually true.
So when you do your own translation of the Hebrew prayer book, we will look forward to seeing how you translate that particular prayer. Alan.
So can you explain how you started to discuss how somebody was getting over from COVID and was very grateful? And so my question is just to do with the Birkat HaGomel.
Yes.
where that fits into the way we express our gratitude.
Yeah, so there's something called Birchat Hagomel, which is the prayer for one who recovers, and it's used in a very, very broad way. I mean, it's not just disease, and it's actually used in synagogue because it calls for a congregational response. So it's not a personal bracha, and I think it's actually part of the Torah service. I actually I'm not sure, but probably broader than that because that would mean you'd only say it when you had Torah. So cancel that. But one of the interesting things, I mean, I don't ever recall. I don't actually recall it even being in Reform prayer books. I suppose I'd have to check that. But when I visited Morocco and went to the synagogue, the custom there is anyone who's visiting from out of the country gets Birkat Komel recited for them because they considered, traveling by air to be something that is inherently dangerous. So surviving just travel, at least the custom in the congregation in Morocco was
Supposed
that.
to be safer statistically.
Well, yeah, I don't think they're worried about that.
Is it supposed to be more dangerous to drive than to fly?
Definitely in Morocco, yes. Erwin.
I learned something from you many years ago, and I still follow it every morning. When I finish my walk, I say Baruch Hashem, and when I see something nice during my walk, flowers, something, I say a blessing. So at least you said 5 blessings. So I do it when I walk.
Yeah, so I often encourage folks just to basically adopt a discipline which says when you notice something beautiful, respond by blessing God. Because
Yes.
that actually, it's not only that you're noticing it and saying, gee, pretty sunset, but you're saying, gee, pretty sunset, it's a gift. It's a gift from God. And God wants more than gee, pretty sunset. God wants me to help other folks. So I that's one of the things that I like about religious spirituality as opposed to just pure spirituality is that religious spirituality places obligations upon you. And in terms of the blessings, yeah, it's an interesting. I hadn't thought about this, Stephen, so I appreciate you raising it. But the list of blessings, and we'll see them from the prayer book in a moment, is quite extensive, and they apply to specific things. Whereas Birchat Gomel leaves, I guess, to you and the congregation, which risk you've overcome. So in Morocco, they develop a custom called a minchag, and either this week or next week we'll talk about minchag, which says that in Morocco, their response to someone traveling by air is to recite this blessing. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into sharing screen. We are reading the article from Judaism 101 about prayers and blessings, and we're almost finished with the article. And I think it was down here about the blessing. No, I can't. I think it's form of a bracha. Now I had it. Let me do a quick check on my calendar. Yes. Okay. Yes, that's where we're reading. So would someone like to read form of a bracha?
I'll take it if no one
Thank
wants
you.
it.
Thanks, Joanne.
All right. Many of the barachot that we recite today were composed by Ezra and the main men of the Great Assembly nearly 2,500 years ago, and they continue to be recited in the same form. All barachot include the phrase Baruch Atah Hashem Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe. This is sometimes referred to as Shem Umalkat, the name and the sovereignty, the affirmation of God as King.
Okay, so this definitely is worth a couple of words of explanation. Whoever wrote this was fairly traditional, and so that person, he or she, would not want to write the word Adonai and Eloheinu unless, and even want us to say it unless we were actually praying. Also, by writing Adonai and Eloheinu, it would make this document, should you print it, one, I think we did, I don't know if we discussed this Monday or whenever, but it would become a document that you just shouldn't throw away, that you should store in a geniza or bury in a Jewish cemetery. And then extending that that idea, I think beyond where it needs to be applied is even not writing out the word Lord or God. There's one Jewish comedian that says, you know, at camp to praise God, they say, give me a G, G, give me a dash, dash, give me a D. And Shem Umalchut, name and sovereignty, affirmation of God as king. Okay, use of thou. Let's continue.
The use of the word thou is worth discussing in modern English. Many people think of the word thou as being formal and respectful, but in fact, the opposite is true. Thou and the corresponding Hebrew atah is the informal, familiar second person pronoun used for friends and relatives. This word expresses our close and intimate relationship with God.
Okay, so this also, I think, is worth a word of explanation. In many Romance languages, such as Spanish and French, there is an informal form of you and a formal form of you. So in Spanish, which I know far better than French, you have tu, which is an informal form of you that you would use with family members and friends, and usted, which would be a formal form of you. In Old English, there were two forms of you also. There was thou, which is the familiar form, and you, which was the formal form. What I think is actually misleading is there are not two forms of you in Hebrew. There is only atah. But what I really find interesting about this is if you open up prayer books that have been translated into Spanish or French, you will find that the translation of the blessings are in the personal informal form. So, you know, instead of to translate Baruch atah Adonai, it would be bendito, tu bendito, Señor, or however they would pronounce that. They would translate Adonai, and I just I find that nice, and it is true that we think of thou as being a very formal expression of you. Okay, let's continue immediately.
Immediately after this phrase, the Barakah abruptly shifts into the third person. For example, in the Berkot HaMitzvot, the first two phrases are Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commandments and commands us. This grammatical faux pas is intentional. The use of the third person pronoun who, while speaking to a person in Hebrew, is a way of expressing extreme respect and deference. This shift in perspective is a deliberately jarring way of expressing the fact that God is simultaneously close to us and yet far above us, intimately related to us and yet transcendent. This paradox is at the heart of the Jewish relationship with God.
And a few words about Birkat Hamazon.
Grace after meals, one of the most important prayers in Judaism, one of the very few that the Bible commands us to recite, is never recited during synagogue services. That prayer is Birkat Hamazon, grace after meals. In Deuteronomy 8:10, we are commanded that when we eat and are satisfied, we must bless the Lord our God. This commandment is fulfilled by reciting the Birkat Hamazon, blessing of the food, after each meal. Reciting Birkat Hamazon is commonly referred to as benching, from the Yiddish word meaning to bless. Although the word bench can refer to the recitation of any Barakah, it is almost always used to refer to reciting Birkat Hamazon.
Yeah, so and in fact, you'll find quite commonly if you go to a Jewish meal of any kind, there'll be little books on the table, and they may be in English called benchers, which will have it'll probably have a few other blessings, but it will certainly have the Birkat Hamazon and a blessing of the food. And it's also, I'll just point out one more thing. I'll call on Erwin. This is actually very typical. In Deuteronomy 8:10, there's a very simple commandment that when you eat and you're satisfied, you must bless God. But the Bible doesn't tell us what exactly we're supposed to do. So it's left to the rabbis in the Talmud who are composing the specific blessings to actually spell out what it is we're supposed to do. Rub-a-dub-dub, thanks for the grub is not sufficient. And the Birkat Hamazon is actually a very long set of blessings. Erwin.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say when I participated at dinner at Chabad. The Birkat Hamazon or benching sometimes lasts a half an hour, half an hour or 45 minutes. And they recite again the blessing for the wine, blessing for the bread, and blessing for the meal itself. So it lasts quite sometimes.
Yeah, so technically, the Birkat Hamazon doesn't have a blessing over wine or bread. It's actually, you say a blessing over wine and bread before you eat wine or bread. And if you have a meal where you eat bread, you're required to say the Birkat Hamazon. And my guess is it will last 10 or 15 minutes, unless it's in the first 7 days after a wedding and the bride and groom are there. Then you actually recite the 7 wedding blessings, the Sheva Brachot, as part of the grace after meals. So that will extend it. Or you say it slowly. That will also extend it. Alan.
I think I'm not finding it in this Tefillah, but I'm pretty sure the Reformed versions of the Birkat Hamazon is shorter than the traditional one.
Yeah, there are a few. I would have to check it. There are a few verses that are in the traditional one which aren't in the Reform one. But I think even when I typically am at meals and there are benchers there, people may skip some. And then quite commonly, and I will do this, I will just say Baruch Atah Adonai. Well, actually, I don't remember. There is kind of one summary blessing, which is, bless God who creates food. And I can't quite remember it right now.
There are either, I don't want to say version unless you tell me it's a version, but there are parts if you're saying it during Shabbat, right?
Yes, like a lot of prayers, there's different introductions and there's different additions. We're going to see. No, when are we going to see? We're going to see that as we discuss the Amidah. There are different versions during Shabbat. There are different additions. There are in the Birkat Hamazon. I don't think there's any subtractions. There's also a different version if you have a minyan or if you don't have a minyan. So it gets quite technical. And I would say that's one of the things. It's Baruch Atah Adonai Chazan et Hakol. Blessed are you, Adonai, sort of the creator of all food. And so, for me and for others who want to skip the 15 to 20 minute version, we might just do one blessing after the meal.
Is that what you just said? Is that directly from the Torah someplace?
No, that's from the Birkat Hamazon.
But there is a word in the Torah that I'm not remembering where it is.
Okay, so let's see if I can open this link in a new tab. And so this is Deuteronomy 8:10. Okay, so my question is, can you see Sefaria now?
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
So this is what it's referring to. When you've eaten your fill, give thanks to your God for the good land given you. Okay, so it's Ve'achalta v'savata v'varacha et Adonai Elohecha al ha'aretz hatova asher natan lach. That phrase is actually in the Birkat Hamazon. But that's pretty much it.
Well, Rabbi once sent to me, I know which one, but it doesn't matter. If you want to just minimally do some acknowledgement, this would be the phrase to say.
Yeah, okay, I would say Chazanat HaKol. It's just a broader. This is strictly for the land. That so
Haaretz, El Haaretz.
yeah, Al Haaretz HaTovah, the good land Asher Natan Lach, that God has given you.
That
Okay.
it leads to the question, sorry, that this might be a verse that's intended to be said when you're in Israel, and you say something different when you're not in Israel, right?
I don't believe there is a difference that you say when I'm talking about in modern rabbinic practice. I don't believe there's a difference when you're in Israel or not in Israel.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, let's go back to the article. And I think well, actually, yeah, this article now is going to cover some elements of the Birkat Hamazon. Okay, so you want to start right here, Joanne? Grace after
Grace
meal.
after meals is recited in addition to the various barakot over food recited before meals. Birkat Hamazon actually consists of 4 blessings, 3 of which were composed around the time of Ezra and the Great Assembly, and a 4th which was added after the destruction of the temple. These blessings are Birkat Hazan, the blessing for providing food, which thanks God for giving food to the world. Birkat Haaretz, the blessing for the land, which thanks God for bringing us forth from the land of Egypt, for making his covenant with us, and for giving us the land of Israel as an inheritance. Birkat Yerushalayim, the blessing for Jerusalem, which prays for the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the coming of the Mashiach. And Birkat HaTov V'cha Maitiv, the blessing for being good and doing good, was added after the destruction of the temple, although it existed before that time. It emphasizes the goodness of God's work, that God is good and does good. In addition to these 4 blessings, the full Birkat Hamazon incorporates some psalms and additional blessings for various special occasions, holidays, guests, etc. If you would like to hear the Birkat Hamazon sung, check out the MP3 recording on sidoraudio.com. The recording is designed for educational purposes and is chanted at very moderate pace with very clear enunciation. Sidor Audio and its sister site, Haftorah Audio, are great sources for learning the melodies of Jewish liturgy, not associated with this website.
Okay.
Finding a minyan, a prayer group. As I said above, Jewish prayer is ordinarily a group activity done with a quorum of 10 people called a minyan. If you're interested in finding an Orthodox minyan in your area to pray, check out GoDaven, a searchable worldwide database of Orthodox minyans. Just tell them where you want to daven, pray, and they'll find you an Orthodox minyan complete with service times and even a link to a map. If you would prefer a conservative synagogue, try the USCJ's View Our Network page. If you prefer Reform, try the URJ's Directory of Congregations. For Restructionist synagogues, try the JR's Directory of Restructionist Congregations and Havarot.
And there's a couple of interesting pages, one of which, okay. So what I want to do now is show you, these are just pages that I copied from an ArtScroll Siddur. Actually, this one, I think this is what it looks like. ArtScroll, very famous publisher of traditional materials, Talmud, Bible, and so on. And so you'll see there's a lot of them, and I'm not going to dwell on them, but I just want to give you a flavor for how many of them there are, and this is even not all of them. So when you wash hands before eating bread, it's the mitzvah blessing, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. That's the mitzvah opening, al netilat yadayim. And they translate it regarding washing of hands, but it actually means elevating the hands. Okay, you know the motzi before eating bread, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. It doesn't have the mitzvah opening. It doesn't have the asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Before eating products of wheat, barley, rye, oats, or spelt, and rice, according to many opinions, but not bread, a borei mine mezonot. So a cookie, but it's not bread, gets borei mine mezonot, who creates species of nourishment, translation here. You know the wine or grape juice, borei pri hagafen. Fruit that grows on trees, borei pri ha'etz, who creates the fruit of the tree. Fruit that grew directly from the ground, borei pri ha'adama, who creates the fruit of the ground. And I think I've probably mentioned more than once interesting questions like, what do you say over a banana? And the rabbis rule that a banana is not a tree, even though we call it a banana tree, because the halachic distinction between a tree and a bush is branches. So the rabbis say banana trees don't have branches, so therefore bananas are, the blessing over a banana is borei pri ha'adama. You can argue with that, and you'll do fine with me. You won't do fine with an Orthodox authority. And other foods, water, chocolate, steak, I don't know, I was going to say nuts, but not nuts. And even there's a whole discussion of this. Maybe one day I'll do a class on what blessings to say about what. Suppose you're eating applesauce. You might think that you should say the same blessing you would say for eating an apple. But the rule is, if you can't see the actual nature of the fruit, you say this all-purpose blessing, which is Shehakol Nihiyah Bidbaro, whose word caused everything to be. Alan.
So this list of different kinds of products that could be in a let's say a multi-course meal, where you have a lot of side dishes and main courses. I'm trying to remember, I was with a group once where a woman.
No, yeah. If you say Hamotzi Lechem min haaretz, it covers everything except wine.
It means if you're, I'm thinking about a religious person or a Chabad person, they wouldn't identify the different things that are in the meal. Correct.
You're at a Shabbat meal, you say a blessing on the wine, you say a blessing on the bread, you don't say a blessing on every little thing you eat.
At the Seder, Passover Seder, we say blessings on.
Do you say
we
blessing?
Say bless. Oh wait.
Hold on a second. You say you haven't yet eaten bread. So,
yeah, I realized that.
So,
right
and so you on the parsley you say borei pri ha'adama. On the maror you say two blessings. Actually, maybe on maror it's just one. But on the matzah you say two blessings. One is hamotzi lechem min haaretz, because it's bread, and the other is the mitzvah blessing, asher kitshanu b'mitzvah tov v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. So you say a blessing responding to the mitzvah, the commandment of eating matzah.
Maror, I would depend on whether you're using the romaine lettuce or you're using the horseradish.
Yeah,
and the horseradish, is it in its original form or is it ground and so forth?
Yeah, but you're saying it after you've already said the blessing on the matzah, so you don't have to worry about it. Once you say the blessing on bread, you don't have to say other specific blessings.
Right. Except for on the remaining cups of wine.
Yeah, wine gets its own blessing. Yes. Okay. So there's also blessings for fragrances. And the nice thing about ArtScroll is it gets pretty specific. Upon entering a perfumery or smelling fragrances of non-vegetable origin, undetermined origin, or a blend of spices of different origin, it's borei mine mezonot. Borei mine vesamim, which is also the blessing we say when we smell the spices at Havdalah, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Fragrant shrubs, trees, or flowers, borei eitze besamim, who creates fragrant trees. Fragrant herbs, grasses, or flowers, who creates fragrant herbage. Smelling fragrant edible fruits or nuts. Hanotein reach tov bepirot. So you actually have to know a lot if you really.
This is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. That's why
to understand all this.
Since we're
and-
talking about COVID earlier, if something you know intellectually it normally smells good, but it doesn't currently smell good to you because of your medical condition, do you still say the blessing?
A perfect question you can ask your Chabad rabbi, Stephen.
I have a related question, which is this is all about pleasant fragrances? What if rotten eggs or skunk or I don't know?
Actually, I don't know if there's a blessing for that, but we're going to get into some unpleasant things. But that's a great question. I don't know.
We're counting,
so-
Rabbi. When we get to 10, we'll do something.
So yeah, right. So we get we had edible fruits and nuts. That's why actually I was thinking about Erwin's comment. My comment is, when you smell something beautiful, if you don't know all these blessings, just say Baruch Hashem, blessed is God, or thank you God, English, Hebrew, but say it out loud and quietly because you want to notice it. Okay, so there's lots of commandments. One is affixing a mezuzah to a doorpost. It's the mitzvah blessing. Likboa mezuzah commands us to affix the mezuzah. It is a commandment in the Torah to have a protective railing around an elevated patio, like I don't know, around your roof if you go on the roof. And so there's a blessing for that. There's a blessing for immersing in a mikveh metal or glass utensils that you want to kosher. You're supposed to take a small bit of dough the size of an olive when you bake dough at least 10 pounds, 2 ounces. And there's some details there. And because it's a mitzvah, it's lahafrish chala min ha-isa, who commands us to separate challah from the dough. I'm gonna just skip down. There's all kinds of blessings about tithing. And before I jump into this next group, I'm gonna call on, I don't know, Alan, if you still have your hand up, and then Erwin.
No.
Okay,
Sorry.
Erwin.
Yes, I wanted to ask you, many years ago, I still have it. When I was a shuk in Israel, they sold me a mezuzah, and they told me that is specifically for travel in the car. And
Yeah, so I would
asked
say-
the guy,
Yeah, so I would say that's not a mezuzah. A mezuzah is affixed to the doorposts of your house or your gates. The
Yeah,
thing they
yeah,
sell
it's-
you, I know they sell it to you. I have them too. There's no commandment to affix it to
I
the
put
door.
it- I have it on a dashboard. I stick it on
Yeah.
the dashboard.
And do you
and
know
it's
what's
in the-
inside it?
No, I never looked
So
inside it.
sometimes in some of these, they will have the traveler's prayer inside it. So I think
Yeah,
it's
that's
a
what they
nice,
told. That's what they told me.
yeah,
I
the
put it in
Birchat
the car.
HaDerech. And so I think it's a nice thing to do. My only objection to it is calling it a mezuzah. So upon seeing lightning or I would say anything beautiful in nature, and this is the one I always teach, it ends in Osei Ma'aseh Bereshit, who makes the work of creation. There's a separate one on hearing thunder.
I learned that one from you, Rabbi, years ago, and I
Yeah,
used it.
the Osei Ma, and I learned it from Richard Levy.
Okay.
On seeing a rainbow in the sky, I'll just read the English. Who remembers the covenant, is trustworthy in his covenant, and fulfills his word. This harkens back to the biblical story of Noah seeing, the rainbow as a sign of the covenant. On earthquake, comet, exceptionally lofty mountains, exceptionally large rivers. It's that standard one I use for all of creation, Osei Ma'aseh Bereshit. On seeing the ocean, and including the Mediterranean, She'asah Hayam Hagadol, who makes the Great Sea. On seeing exceptionally beautiful people, trees or fields, Shechacha lo ba'olamo, who has such in his universe. On seeing exceptionally strange looking people or animals, Misanei Habriot, let's see, how do they translate it? Who makes creatures different. On seeing trees in bloom during the spring, This blessing may be recited only once a year. On seeing an outstanding Torah scholar, Shenatan b'chachmo levasar v'dam, who gives of his knowledge those. Oh, that's interesting. Wow, those who fear him. That's really interesting. Shenatan b'chachmo. Look, I don't see any of that in there. Shenatan, the one who gives b'chachmo of his wisdom to humans. Levasar v'dam really just means flesh and blood, and they translate it to those who fear him. I don't know where they get that translation. Upon seeing a Gentile king who rules lawfully but cannot be overruled, who has the power of life and death, the following is recited. And then on modern rulers,
isn't that the prayer for Tevye about the Tsar?
They don't actually recite anything in Hebrew, but yeah, that would be about the Tsar. So this would be Shenatan Michbodo lebasar v'dam, who I'm just going to translate it, and we'll see what their translation is. Who gives of his kavod, of his wisdom or glory to human beings. Yeah, so that's pretty much the way they're translating it. Upon seeing 600,000 or more Jews together, that doesn't happen a lot, and it's Chacham Haratzin. Okay, so I don't know the Hebrew well enough. They're translating knower of secrets, and upon first meeting a friend who has recovered from a life-threatening illness, who has given to us and is not given to the dust. That's nice. Seeing a destroyed synagogue, Dayan Ha'emet. That's also prayer you say when someone has died or hearing really bad news. Upon seeing a destroyed synagogue that's been restored, who sets limits for a widow. That's so interesting. Upon seeing a place where you have experienced a miracle, saved from imminent danger, one who experienced salvation more than one place in lifetime must depend a roster of other places. So that's a complicated one. But wait, there's more. So the Shehachianu, you may know that's when a good thing that happens repeatedly happens. Shehachianu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh, who has kept us alive, sustained us, brought us to this season. Upon hearing unusually good news that benefits oneself and others, hatov v'hametiv, who is good. You're blessing God who is good and does good. Bad news, Dayan Ha'emet, the true judge. And upon donning a new garment of significant value to the wearer, who clothes the naked, Malbish Arumim. And then they're going to refer you to other blessings here, putting on tefillin, putting on a talis, Torah reading, and so on. I think that's all I had from this.
Rabbi,
yes.
If you go back to when you said Habriot, and if I remember correctly, you said Kavot Habriot is a respect for a human being.
For living things, yes. I think it was a secular scholar. Let's see.
No,
I don't remember where that was.
It was further on. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
But Kavot Habriot means that respect for the other person.
Yeah, briot can be a person. It can be just a living thing.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, and
this is a trick question.
It's a phrase also for health. If someone sneezes, the Hebrew expression is labriot, which is like to your health. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing, and I am going to make Alan. I presume you're going to share, right, Alan?
Yeah,
I'm going to make Alan a co-host. So those of you who are interested are invited to stay. Alan goes to Israel more than almost anybody I know, and he has been there recently and has had a bunch of interesting visits. So you're going to share some of those with us.
Okay, I'm going to give me a minute because of the way the screen sharing thing is going to work, but let me see what I can do. I may have to switch to my computer, that's all.
Oh, yeah, I would think you need to do this on a computer.
Yeah, let me do that. So I'm going to come back in on the other side, but I'll still
Okay.
be, it's me, I'll be make sure I'm host, a co-host or something.
Yeah,
Okay,
when you come in, I'll have to make you a co-host again.
okay, and then I'll mute this other thing so it
Okay.
So while we're waiting, Rabbi, I just
Yes.
want to say that I also say Baruch Hashem a lot throughout the day. And when I'm able to go out walking, when it's not humid, I think a lot about the agriculture and the land and
Mhm.
how grateful we should be to have all of that and what it was like so many years ago for our forefathers as they traveled through the land to get,
Yep.
right? So I think being grateful and blessings is very much a part of my life. I even very often say to people, bless you for saying, if they said something to me that's very kind or.
Yeah, and I would say that it is the secret of happiness. I believe the secret of happiness is gratitude. And as I kind of introduce this whole subject, the idea of saying blessings periodically or saying blessings in response to every gift, whether it's food or a beautiful sky or seeing a child or something,
Right, exactly.
actually reminds you how many gifts you have received during the day. Whereas if you don't stop, you can just get through the day and say, just another crummy day.
I think it's a way of really focusing on the basics of life. When you really just pull back and think about how grateful you should be for what you have and just, blessings that you give to people, all of that, I think is just puts life into a different, for me anyway, into a different perspective.
Yep, I agree with that. Okay, Alan, you are
yeah,
on board and you are a co-host.
Okay, good. Talk among yourselves. Just I need to
Okay.
Okay,
get this.
I put this in the chat, but since we have time to kill, this is a trick question. You're outside, you see lightning, you start saying the blessing for the lightning, but before you can finish it, you hear thunder. Do you stop and start the thunder blessing right away, or do you finish the lightning blessing first and then say the thunder blessing?
I would say, since my attitude is things in nature get osema a savory sheet. So I would, and I don't think my understanding of the tradition is you don't have to say it after every incident of, every stroke of lightning. So if I see a beautiful thunderstorm and I'm in awe of it, I would say it once.
Now, I told you it's a trick question. The answer is if you start a blessing as soon as you see lightning and you isn't enough time to finish it before you hear the thunder, that means that the time between the lightning and the thunder were close enough that you really don't have any time to say any more blessings. You've got to stop and run inside right away because you're about to get struck by lightning if that
Okay.
close.
Okay.
That's very good, Stephen.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, don't wear metal tefillin.
I think tefillin are always leather, but
I think so too.
well, the straps are leather. The writing is on parchment. I don't know what the boxes are made of.
Yeah, actually, the good ones, the traditional ones, are also made of leather, kosher animal.
Anyway, so I think the rules. The distance is about 1 mile for every 5 seconds of delay
Yes.
between the lightning and the thunder.
Yep.
But anyway,
That's
if it's under some amount of time, and I don't remember how much time, that means it's really close and that you should not be staying, and that you really need to get inside immediately.
Yeah, a mile is about 5,000 feet, 5,280 feet, and the speed of sound is roughly 1,000
about
feet per
1,100.
second.
Yeah, exactly. It's 1,100 feet per second. So
1,100, yeah.
yeah.
So you just, and I do this all the time. Once you hear lightning, I'm sorry, yeah, once you see lightning, start counting slowly seconds, and then it's about a mile distant for every
or you
5
could
seconds.
time in advance at some point how long the lightning blessing takes and know where in the lightning blessing corresponds to how far away. if let's say the blessing takes you 5 seconds, then that means that if it's before the end of the blessing, it's under a mile over the end of the after the end of the blessing over a mile, for example.
Of course, Stephen, that means that you have to calibrate your blessings.
Yeah. Well, you have to do is to at some point say the blessing with the stopwatch going, so you can figure out exactly where you are in the blessing at each number of seconds.
Exactly.
Exactly how many seconds it takes to get up where each spot in the blessings.
And by the time you have finished that, you have forgotten the reason you wanted to have a blessing.
And it's time to take your Paxlovid.
All right, so what do you
Okay,
see on the screen? Do you see anything from me
Yeah,
yet?
we see the collection of photos that you've been highlighting.
Okay, let me try to get to the beginning and I'll talk you through them, but I'm a little off. I should have practiced this before because I don't do it very often. Let's see, how am I gonna do
That is
this?
a general rule of life.
You see me scroll like,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we
Okay,
see
so-
whatever you have on your screen.
okay, so then that's it. That's
We
my
see it.
boarding
We
pass.
see it.
Okay.
We see it.
Okay, I wanna make that larger if I can and just focus on that and get rid of everything else. And
Good
that
luck.
I don't remember how to
I
do.
would say don't worry about that.
Okay, just a second. Let me do one thing here. Let me do the view. Enter
You
full
could say
screen.
just enter full screen.
That sort of gets better, a little better. Let me do one more. Okay, you can see, all right, so if I go, let's see what happens if I do that. Yeah, okay, good. You see, you've got a picture of Israel as seen by the screen on El Al as we're landing, and I only mention it so I can mention major cities. You can see that from Gaza City all the way up to Lebanon, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. So this gives you a scale of my traveling from the south to the further north was Nahariya, just south of Lebanon. Okay, let's see what happens. Okay, everybody always needs a
Yep,
welcome
we're
to
good.
Israel
We're good.
sign. But you see the junk on the left too. I was trying to get rid
Don't
of
worry
that.
about it, Alan, or we'll be here all night.
Okay, right. Okay, so one of the first things I did is I took the train to Haifa and Nahariya in the north, and I got to spend some time with my Ukrainian rabbi friend, Alex Duchovny, he describes himself as the chief rabbi of the chief reform rabbi of Ukraine, because he's over 5 different reform synagogues, and he's exile from Kiev because of the war. He moved to Haifa. And we got a little update. He still runs his congregation because not everybody left Ukraine, and so he does some teaching here in Israel, and he also maintains his community in Ukraine. The
Why
next,
is the writing in the background look backwards?
yeah, that's
iPhones. When you
a
take
Zoom.
selfies in iPhones, they give you a mirror image.
I think it might be, yeah, but you can reverse it if I
Yes.
put some time into
Yeah,
it. But
Let's not do that.
Right.
no, we're not going to do that. My next stop was to visit Anat Hoffman. Some of you may know her. She was
Oh, yeah.
the head of the Israel Religious Action Center, the reform movement's version in Israel for fighting for women's rights, for racial equity, and many other things. And now she's retired from that, but she's still the head of the Women of the Wall. So every month she goes to the Kotel and helps participate in the monthly services, and she lives in Haifa, which is why I ended up there. When I went to Nahariya, I got to get a tour of the synagogue, which is in a community center, which was attacked, an arson attacked. I wouldn't say we didn't decide, it wasn't described as a Havdalah thing, other than you could spit to the evacuation district from this building because it's right on the edge that the government requires or urges people to evacuate. But Nahariya is not evacuation. So what I'm showing here, I have a different picture from a few months ago of the fire that damaged this, and now it's pretty much all taken care of. This particular symbol, which we don't see in most American stairways is directing people to a bomb shelter. So that's all over the place in Israel. In fact, you'll see a Google map that does that. This is the gathering after they gave me the tour. The woman in the center, toward the back, to my left, let's say, is the Rabbi Savannah, and the others are congregants who've been there for years. They've suffered through the Iraq Scud missiles and all kinds of things, but they're there, and Hezbollah isn't going to scare them away. Let me let's see, did I put these in? I'm going to skip through this. Okay, I went to the what's called the Museum of the People, called ANU, and I saw this wonderful exhibit on the top floor, which I describe as highlighting Jewish identity through different presentations of lay people and rabbinic people about, as it says here, what it means to be Jewish. Very good thing. Then I went, not in the exact same order. Well, actually, it was the same day. I went to the Reform Synagogue in Tel Aviv that I'm also a member. All these synagogues I'm a member of anyway overseas. Beit Daniel, but is the largest Reform synagogue in Israel, and they're right on the northern part of Tel Aviv, near the river, not far from the ocean, actually. And this is sort of what it looks like in their building. They're set up where I guess other synagogues even here is the sanctuary is upstairs, and this is what it looks like. Then I went to the Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, which was created around a plaza that's outside of the Tel Aviv Museum. And every Saturday night, there is the Reform Movement conducts a Havdalah and music fest before going into joining the group of the hostage families with a rally with different speeches about people who are held as hostages, or in a few cases, people have been rescued from who are hostages who are no longer hostages. And so this is the plaza, and the woman on the right, Anna Kozlowski, is the CEO of the Reform Movement in Israel. And this is sort of lets you see where we're sitting right next to the museum. Okay. Oh, I don't think, yeah, I'm going to try to play some music, but I don't know if that'll work. Let's try
Yeah,
that.
unless when you did share screen, you
Can
selected.
you hear it?
No, we don't hear it.
Okay, good. I didn't set that up right. Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Moving along. And so at Haftalah, they pass out a dozen or 15 or 20 candles, and then you hand it around. At Hebrew Union College, they just upgraded, and Rabbi Michael, you wouldn't have seen it.
No, I
They
don't.
just finished it. It took them 2 years to finish it, but it is now another access. If you imagine on King David Street, looking to the left where the staircase up to HUC is, this is kind of in the center, and it gives you a ground level access to the classes and the rooms on the first floor. Very nice upgrade.
I have many happy memories sitting in that courtyard between classes and just hanging out.
Yeah, it's a really amazing. So the building, which is referred to as Beit Shmuel, of which HUC and the religion in Iraq and a few other groups are part of, it was the land was given for free essentially in the early 50s, because they didn't like this land. It had no value, but now it's right near the old city and it's worth a lot of money.
Well, actually,
tell me.
Hebrew Union College started as an agricultural and archaeological school.
Exactly.
The government would never allow a Reform seminary to exist at that time. So HUC was a school of archaeology.
Right.
And they gave them the worst spot in Jerusalem, which was right on the border of the old city, which was in Jordanian hands. And so it's, I don't know, maybe 500 yards away. I'm not a good judge of how far the old city walls were from HUC. And the Jordanian snipers would routinely be shooting at the Jewish quarter. not it's not the Jewish quarter at Jewish Jerusalem. It's a new city, and so if you actually look in the older buildings of HUC, there are almost no windows facing the old city.
Right.
As after 67, when they added on beautiful, I can't remember what pictures you have, but they have beautiful views of the old city.
Right.
But before that, you would not want to have a window facing the old city because you might get shot at.
So in Beit Shmuel, where they used to have guest rooms, you got that view you're describing, but that's closed now too. I'll also add about the architectural thing, which I recently learned, but Rabbi, you probably know, is Nelson Gluck, is that his name?
Yes, he was one of the original chancellors of president.
He was the genius behind creating a Year in Israel program, where I always used to think of it as a way for first-year rabbinic students to learn Hebrew and learn Israel as a tourist. But what Gluck had in mind, since he was in archaeology, is to learn the archaeology of the land. And so this emphasis of archaeology, it was embedded in the I don't know how much you experienced it that way, Rabbi.
Yeah, so we had digs and we had tours, but I think it's to be more precise, it was originally a school of archaeology.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
when the politics could handle it, they admitted that it was really a seminary for Reform rabbis.
So this is the courtyard at Hartman Institute, which is an educational organization that teaches, I describe it as teaches North Americans about Zionism and Israel from a contemporary viewpoint. So in the classes, you're going to get things tied to Torah and Talmud somewhat, but mostly you're going to hear a lot of political things about the challenges of the government, and in the case since October 7th, all kinds of things that we learned that impact Israel and Israelis. So this is the courtyard. Because of the weather, we would have in evenings we would have this kind of programs, and that's Rabbi Hartman and somebody else who I can't probably.
And I would add there are separate Hartman programs for rabbis.
Absolutely, that we're the guinea pigs, if that's not too unkosher. So I've been in that class the last week in June 3 times, and once in a while during those, your schedule might be slightly different, but it's almost the same. And there'll be a time when somebody will ask a really good question, and Rabbi Hartman will look to his colleague and say, we need to fix that before the rabbis come next week.
Right. I think that early July is when the rabbis.
Yeah, no, they go when, and even some of my rabbi friends in America come in a day early. So I went to one of several synagogues for Shabbat, and this is Harel, the oldest Reform synagogue in. I like to emphasize to people when I tell these tours, because a lot of people, or these discussions, a lot of people don't appreciate the presence of Reform movement in Israel. Has been around, as we've already kind of alluded to, since before 1967. But this synagogue it's a side street off of King George, and it's called Kohelet Harel, and they are the oldest. They started in 1957. And now we're back out to the IM. So the Reform movement has a Havdalah in Jerusalem. I showed you a Tel Aviv Hostage Square. This is not Hostage Square, but it's in a park not far from, and not from, it's not far from the rallies near the president's office where people are making speeches now, not just on Saturday, they do it other nights now, encouraging about the hostages, about changing the government, you name it, the things that you probably have heard about. And so now I'm back at Hartman, and so one of the interesting things, many of you have heard about Hirsch Goldberg, one of the hostages. It turns out he's promoted or advertised a lot in Jerusalem, because I was told he's the only hostage who actually resides in the city of Jerusalem, if that's true. And he's a cousin of one of the executives at Hartman. So I don't know this guy, but Rachel Goldberg has been very vocal in about helping to to rescue his son.
He's also an American.
He is also American. Well, he's dual citizenship.
Dual.
Yeah, right, exactly. He's on the list of the 6 or 8 people that get mentioned by the Prime Minister in his speech this morning to Congress, and also other times when it's appropriate, is that America cares about the hostages, but they specifically always feel this obligation to rescue Americans, and this man is one of those. And now we went to Sderot in the south, so this is just an entrance plaza. What we actually got to see, which I probably isn't representative in these pictures very much, is that one of the big incidents on October 7th was the police station outside of in the city of Sderot, where they blew up the police station when the IDF determined there were no Israelis in it, and it was all Hamas people. And so this is they've set up I guess a little exhibit or museum helping to explain about the city of Sderot and the events of October 7th. And so this is a plan in the land. This is right at the property where the police station was blown up. And that's a view. I have a similar view in March when I was there before, so it's not probably important other than it looks a little different. And now we went to the Nova Festival site, which you may have heard of, the attack on killed, I don't know how many people were there, but over 300 young men and women who are having part of their annual outdoor music overnight program on October 6th and 7th. And so this was a target of Hamas. And what they've done with the property is they've created like a memorial park, and JNF has planted seeds, trees, and different family members are creating just different memorial symbols. So this is one of my cousins in near Tel Aviv in Hod Sharon. I met I met some friends, and the father of one of these people who were killed there created this exhibit, and I made a point at his father's request, possibly primarily, is go find my son's exhibit and take a picture. So I did, with some help with somebody. I was able to find that, and we had some discussions about the tragedy of that's what's setting here. So the people in the Hartman field trip this is what this is part of. About 50 people. We had some discussions. Okay, this is, I want to show 2 things here. This one and the next one is a Google map when I'm on the bus, right? So we're going through this area that you may have heard some of these places at kibbutz that have been, seriously damaged, like Kfar Aza, and you see where Gaza is. It's just 50 yards, or the fence is on Kfar Aza. I was there in March, is right along the Gaza itself. But you'll notice at the top, your Google map here is not configured the same way as their Google map, and it's called bomb shelters. So I maybe have another picture where I actually clicked on that, and I got to see where all the bomb shelters are in the map in the area that I was on. And so this is so Kibbutz Be'eri is relatively, it's the largest one, and the most people who were murdered, and also the most, I think the most hostages were taken from there. Back to Hartman, and that's just another map, unless somebody has any map questions. Going once, to keep going. Okay, what am I trying to do? So we did have, Hartman always has some good speakers, and Yair Lapid, who's was the prime minister during the Bennett, and partly during that period, he shared the prime ministership. So we heard a little discussion. I remember he's a left of center guy. I think he's a left of center, but he's an anti-Netanyahu guy. So what you hear in these presentations Of course, Rabbi Hartman on the right is also very critical of the current coalition government. As you hear things that they would like to see fixed, they don't focus on what's bad, but they focus on what would be fixed in the next government. Okay, so then we went. Oh, I'm in. I went to the Pardes Institute for one day of studying. I took some classes, but we started with one of the volunteering experiences which I had, which is we went to a factory where we played the role, about 50 people, to help bag lentils so they could be shipped to in effect needy people. It's not shipped to the normal grocery stores. These are organizations that are supporting not always homeless, but there's all kinds of need for food because of people in the reserves and people who have lost family, and breadwinners are not in normal things. So this is the kind of volunteer work that they appreciate, visitors from America or North America or any place. So we got to get a little training, and then we got to put this machine which has a conveyor belt in it. You push a button, it puts you have to put the bag up first, and it puts some lentils in a bag, and then it seals the bag. And we did, the group of 5 or 6 of us in my team. It says 130, but I think by the time we were done, it was close to 300 in a few hours. And that was very much appreciated by the people running this, because they just don't have enough foreign workers or Israeli workers, or because of reserves and other reasons. This is a Sid Street. This is my cousin's dog. I meant to skip some of these. Sorry about that. And then I did go to the Mashav where my friend's son his body was retrieved in October 7th. Well, it was retrieved a few days later. And so they really wanted me, and this is their way of mourning and memorializing their son. So I went to this place near Hod Sharon, and I got to see how they've set up their home with all kinds of exhibits, baby pictures, albums from the army. And this is the couple. And this is they made a sculpture around the grave and so forth. Okay, now I'm back to Tel Aviv, and this is another week for another, this is Hastad Square in Tel Aviv. And they still have, like they did in March, but a different number of an open seat for every hostage. And I don't exactly understand the logic of the little dolls, but there is that. And after the Havdalah, then there's these presentations and other videos that are held in the same square, all in Hebrew, but it's interesting to stand around and how people stay and express their support for the hostages. More dog pictures. The second and last volunteering is an organization called Leket Israel, which has been around a long time. And it's on a list when you want to volunteer, and I happen to know somebody who works there. And so what we did here, this group of about 50 people, is we did different products. So we were told after an entire morning of 3 hours that we had actually helped with 20,000 pounds of things. In our case, we did, I was part of onions and beets. I've never seen beets this big. These beets, if you pick them, some of them out, are as big as a cantaloupe. One of the things I learned, though, is there was a group of Australians from Birthright in Australia. Rabbi, did you realize there was Birthright not just in America?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't either. So they're from Melbourne, Australia, and they were on their 10 days in Israel, but one of their assignments, was to do some volunteer work. So these nice guys. And we are, this is a view on a train, which is not uncommon, where you see a lot of soldiers carrying rifles. And
They're
go ahead.
here. They're using the
Say
train
again?
for transportation. They're going somewhere on the train using it for transportation, or they're stationed on the train for security.
they're going someplace. So when
They're passengers. They're not working on the
the
train. Right?
typical times I've seen soldiers, except isolated ones, but in groups like this, it's usually on Sundays. So a lot of soldiers get a leave on Shabbat. And so the trains are really packed on Sunday, which is the first work day in Israel. And so that's I'm sure what this is. And yeah, because when I've never actually seen anybody that resembles security on a train. I never feel unsafe, but this is just people en route to either to their homes or back to base.
One of the things, you back up 1 second.
Okay.
That I always noticed in Israel is they're not soldiers not always in full uniform, but
Right.
if they're on duty, you can see the one in the kind of on the left. The magazine is in his weapon, and the soldiers that are not on duty, the magazine has like a Velcro thing, and it's not in the weapon, but
Oh.
it's about a second away from being slammed into the weapon in case it's needed. But that was one of the things in some of my early trips to Israel. Just was I found a little disconcerting as you take a bus just anywhere, and you'd see a bunch of young people with automatic weapons, and they weren't in uniform. So it's certainly not something you see every day or any day in the United States.
Well, in my last trip, and I had a picture, if you might remember, there was a young lady sitting next to me in the Shabbat service with a rifle sitting on her lap. I didn't know enough that until you just told me to look at where her magazine was
Yeah.
or position, but she wasn't in uniform. She was a civilian dress, but she was carrying a rifle.
Yeah, I think I believe the rule is if you're if you're a soldier, even if you're off duty, you always have your weapon with you. And the question is whether it's, I guess locked and loaded is the expression.
But I have
But
watched how the soldiers carrying them,
mhm,
they keep their finger near the trigger.
yeah,
I mean, not the off duty, not the ones you're describing, but the
right.
ones in uniform, they're not just thrown over their shoulder where they have to take some 15, 20 seconds to get them in position.
Yeah,
They hold them in a way that their hands are ready to go if they need
yeah,
it.
yeah.
This last one is out of order, but at the Hostage Square, this was months ago, I saw this before, another reversed is they created this tunnel exhibit where you can walk through this dark tunnel for maybe 75 feet and you can walk out at the other side. But it's not, so it's a symbol of the nature of the hostages being in symbols other than this doesn't smell funny and it's not totally dark. So my image of the hostages conditions are a lot worse than this exhibit at the Hostage Square. But that's the intent of reminding people of how all these people are being kept from captivity. And that is my last slide. And thank you. Any questions or comments?
One thing-
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Erwin. You might want to
Okay. I would like to ask you when you are in the bomb shelter during the raid, are the bomb shelter are supplied with water and food and medical equipment?
So I didn't mention this, but when you go to Israel now, you get training in case there's a siren and you have to do this. So the good news is I've never had to go in. I've never heard a siren while I was there, and I've never had to go into a bomb shelter. My understanding is from the stories about October 7th is that the bomb shelters are equipped with a small amount of supplies like water. And that created a problem because the nature of the invasion on October 7th in the South well exceeded the capacity so that people couldn't get to bathrooms and they couldn't get food and water. So the part of the complication was what the planning was around rockets. I think that's why the bomb shelters in the kibbutzim were not even, there were no locks on them because they didn't plan for humans coming into the kibbutz. They planned for rockets that were for, that you went into a bomb shelter to protect you from a explosion, and it would be of a limited time.
Yeah, I actually spent the night in a bomb shelter.
You did?
During my year in Israel. It was in the summer, and I was on an archaeological dig in northern Israel. It was a dig at Tel Dan, and we would dig during the day. We were supposed to be there for a week, but on the second or third night, we're actually kind of relaxing at a kibbutz where we were staying, and there are trucks running through the area, and there's loudspeakers in Hebrew, and I was, surprisingly enough, never heard the phrase "get your tuchus to a bomb shelter" in Hebrew before, but they made it very clear that's where we were headed. So
This was the Second Lebanon War, was it?
It wasn't during any war. It was a time of peace, but they forgot to tell Hezbollah that it was a time of peace. So there were Katyusha rockets being fired into northern Israel, and that's where we were. And so the students all went into one shelter, which was a fairly small room. There was a toilet, which at least at first was working, but stopped fairly quickly. I think we brought from the kibbutz, we bought water bottles and I don't even remember whether I think there were thin mattresses there, but we kind of had our stuff. I think we left our stuff at the kibbutz, but we bought jackets and things. So some of us are sleeping on the floor, some of us are sleeping on cots, and you're right. The door to the shelter was not locked. I mean, the reason to be down there was for bombs, and rockets, and we spent the night there, and the dig was canceled. We all went home the next day, and I don't know if I've ever told this story, but one of the reasons I got to write my book was because of Hezbollah and the Katyusha rockets. I started writing my book, which some of you may not know this. I wrote a book for Christians about Judaism.
I have a copy. I think you put my name in it at one point.
Yeah, I always say the truly rare copies are the ones I haven't signed.
No, this isn't signed. This is acknowledgments because it had to do with Carol.
Oh, I mentioned your name.
It had to do with Carol.
Right.
Okay. Anyway.
So actually, I sent this book to some scholars to review, and they tore it to shreds, particularly the stuff I wrote about Christianity. So I got very discouraged and stopped working on it. And then I went to this dig in northern Israel, and we were supposed to spend a week there. And after 2 days, thanks to Hezbollah, we were sent home. And here I am with nothing to do for like 5 or 6 days. And I said, you know what? I'm going to start working on the book. And, I had a little computer there. I had obviously my notes and things, and I had a great library. I'm at HUC. So I actually started working on, at first, the easy sections in the book. So I didn't give an acknowledgement to Hezbollah for helping me get the project done, but that actually is true. If it wasn't for them, I may not have ever finished a book.
I was in a bomb shelter in Sderot.
Yeah.
At a school, a public school. The kids it wasn't in session, but there was an alarm, and they put all of us from the delegation from the Jewish Federation of LA into the shelter.
So I asked
in about 2005 or 2003, I was actually on a rabbi's tour of Israel, and we visited Sderot, and we visited a family observing Shiva, a young 17-year-old woman who had been killed by a Katyusha rocket. She was actually protecting her younger brother, and physically on top of him, because basically Sderot is right next to Gaza, as you know, and you have only seconds. Once that alarm goes off, you start running for the bomb shelters, and you don't always make it. So we had this group of rabbis visiting this Shiva home for a beautiful 17-year-old young woman who was killed. And of course, you multiply that by thousands.
Some of the message that I experienced in March and I did again in June is how people are still coping because the war is not over and a lot of people, a lot of soldiers are injured who are not back to duty, and of
Mhm.
course the reservists, all those numbers have gotten smaller since the first few months and at the beginning of the war. So the number of people in reserves have been sent home in some cases, but they've also been called back. So the living in a wartime is well, until October 7th, having gone there a dozen times, it wasn't the same. You know, I mean, when you're on the street and in a restaurant or in a shuk, you have to remind yourself that there's something now there's I have an app called the Red Alert that anybody could have, and Homefront Command, I think, is another one. So somehow when there's a rocket sent from Gaza or from Lebanon, I get an alert. And when I was sitting in the Pardes, I didn't tell you about the Pardes Institute like I did Hartman. I'm sitting in this class about talking about faith and Talmud was the topic. One of the things that Pardes is different than Hartman, as I described, Hartman is more current events and contemporary Zionism in Israel. Pardes uses texts to discuss relevant subjects, and this had to do with October 7th and faith and Talmud. But I'm watching these. This was the Friday, probably it was July 4th, actually. I know when it was because I know the one day I was there. And I'm watching the number of rockets go up and over 100. And I'm thinking, this is going to start a new war. It didn't. And 200 rockets were sent from Lebanon in one morning. 200. I mean, it's amazing how much infrastructure must be behind the scenes for both armies, the Lebanon army, I mean, the Hezbollah army and the Israel army, that 200, and that didn't trigger a war. I thought I was going to be there for a war. I was in Jerusalem, but nevertheless, and my cousin says they're just playing this back and forth thing. This is not this. They may start a war. They may a real war like we have with Hamas might happen, and it's predicted, some people often predict it will, but this rocket stuff, so the kids can't go back to school on September 1st. It was officially announced this week that the way kids are going to get education for this school year is not in their own schools near their homes in northern Israel because of the condition with Hezbollah. So I'm only mentioning this part because it seems very peaceful day to day when you're a visitor, but the lifestyle of all, I mean, the closer you are to one of those areas, the more impact, but everybody is affected. And
Alan,
yeah,
Alan,
yes.
I want to ask you a large portion of Israel's economy depends on tourists. So how does this affect now the Israeli economy that tourism is so down that basically only politicians and officials are going to visit for, photo ops?
Well, there are missions, if you can call them, like I was in March, and so there's quite a lot of non-Israelis who contribute to but not a lot. Your point, Erwin, is that it's a tiny amount of tourism because of the war, and that's evidence. I didn't stop on the one picture. Again, when you're in the airport, there's only like 6 or 7 counters where El Al, is the airline in use. And so all of United and Delta and Turkish Airlines and Japan, all the dozens of airlines are not flying into Israel. So the answer is, I haven't seen any, like dollar impact, but your question is right, Erwin, that tourism is seriously affected because of the war. And that's partly because the airlines don't want to land there, but it's also partly people make different judgments than I do. So I don't feel afraid to go. I know there's maybe a little more risk of a problem than there would be. But there's there's also, I can
And
sarcastically.
I have to tell you, having organized and led a bunch of congregational trips to Israel, everybody's always afraid to go to Israel. And that's in normal times.
Right.
And so now I would say I haven't heard of a normal congregational trip going to Israel. There may be, I just haven't heard of them.
Yeah,
There are missions.
Our
It might be
synagogue-
difficult just for the insurance. You see, insurers may not want to insure aircraft.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a
so-
fact. I was told that, to your point, Bryce, exactly. The issue is, it's not that Delta wouldn't want to fly, but Delta's insurance company doesn't want, the condition was the following. Let me back up. The condition was the insurance company will allow the crew to fly to Israel, but not stay overnight. Okay, so you can't technically do that for various reasons, from union to distance. And so because the insurance company doesn't want to be insured for employees who would be there overnight for the war, then they don't fly to Israel. So
Yeah.
that's
So,
why the
Lois,
insurance.
you were going to say something.
Sorry.
It's just our congregation, Valley Beth Shalom, has taken 2 congregational groups, all adults, mostly focused on what you did, Alan, volunteerism.
Mhm. Yeah, but I would say normal congregational, 10-day
Right.
trips, see the high points. It's just,
Right.
I don't think they've resumed. And so,
Right.
the economy is affected because it's heavily geared to tourism, but also so many people are in the army now, in the reserves. So
Right.
you have many other elements of the economy just lacking people. So they really
So
need the
And-
volunteers.
My other,
Alan, where
Sorry.
did you stay?
where did I stay? So
Yeah, are the hotels operating is what I,
Yeah, as far, and Airbnbs and hotels. So in Jerusalem, I stayed 11 days in a small boutique hotel. It's called the Brown Moshav. And when I'm not there, I stay with my cousins. So I had 2 sources. But I was going to say this about trips. So my temple, and the one also that Liz is a member of, a Congregation of Emmanuel in San Francisco, the rabbi had a mission planned for mid-May. And it was all organized, and maybe 20 or 30 people signed up. And then the Iranian missile incident happened on April 14th. And so it wasn't that the temple canceled it, but the congregants said, we're not going to Israel because Iran is showing missiles at Israel. So they canceled it. And Rabbi Bauer was telling me that they just had to cancel it because people
Okay,
didn't.
I am going to call it an evening. There's actually a bunch of things I need to do.
Okay.
But thank you, Alan, for sharing that, and folks
You all.
for hanging in.
I
And
s-
I'm
it's-
away for the weekend, so I will not be conducting a class next Monday, but I will be here next Wednesday, and we'll finish up this topic.
I
Thank
think
you, Rabbi, and good night.
able to get the museums and parks and stuff done so quickly that in the United States, there's no way we'd have all of that in under a year from when it started.
What are you referring to, Stephen?
That you were showing these museums and
yes,
parks
right.
and so
Yeah.
forth that were built after something that started less than a year ago. And in the United States, any sort of memorial or anything really that construction, it's over a year just to do the environmental impact statement.
Israel is amazing at getting
Israelis
things
do
done.
that. They do that. That's worth noting that they can make those kind of gestures, and it's good for the people, and it's good for the visitors to have a context.
And I think some of you know this, that I work for several Israeli companies, and that attitude permeates Israel. So when, it was an American company, I'd come up with a crazy idea, and the job of the folks, the engineering group, would be to prove why it can't be done. Whereas the Israeli engineers would say, Michael, if you can sell it, we'll figure out a way to build it. And I love the Israeli.
I just want to say thank you, Alan.
Oh,
Me
Thank
too.
you,
Thank you,
Alan.
Alan.
Yes, that was
Okay, we'll
great.
see you next time.
Very, very
Thank
nice.
you.
Thank you,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
Thanks,
Toda
everybody.
Bye.
See you.